Hi, welcome back. In this video we're going to delve deeper into parallel arrays. Prior to watching this video, you should have watched the video on arrays and on two-dimensional arrays. You should have also watched the videos on functions, specifically pass by value and pass by reference and how functions work. First, a little review. So with parallel arrays, you want to think of something that we have in the house. Have you all seen the shoe organizers? We have rows and columns. In a parallel array, we consider each column an array, and the columns on each row have some significance towards each other. They share a relationship. You could consider that, let's say, the first column stores student names. So we have one student name per cell here. The second column represents test scores for the first midterm. And the third column represents test scores for the second midterm, and so on. So the midterm scores share a relationship with the student. The student scores for the midterms are in the same row. So remember, arrays always start with 0. So in row 0, we call that index 0. The student has a relationship with the second two cells. These two cells share the same index. So student sub 0, midterm 1 sub 0, and midterm 2 sub 0 all have a relationship, i.e. the midterms belong to the student. So let's go to an example now. We're going to talk about a lot of things here. First off, when using arrays, we want to create a constant for the max size of the array. I'm just having 10 here because this is just an example. So I have a function called print student scores. Notice I have a function header. Function headers should list what the function does, what the inputs are, and what the outputs are, or what is returned. I will go into deeper about what function headers are at a later time. But we have a print student scores. So the only purpose for this function is to print the scores of the students. And notice it has a return type of void, which means there is no return in the function. And it also means we are not going to change anything. So we're going to pass the student array and the grades array. Now, like I said, this is just an example. So I have just two arrays and they are parallel. So the students array is side by side with the grades array, and with arrays, when we pass arrays to functions, we have to pass the size of the array. So we have students, grades, and the size. By default, all of the arrays passed to functions are by reference. You have to remember that. All arrays passed to functions are by reference. The designers of C++ took a trade-off. It's a lot easier and a lot more efficient if we pass arrays by reference, so we don't have to copy the whole contents of an array. Let's say we have an array of 10,000 elements. Well, if we were passing 10,000 elements to this function, actually it would be 10,000 times 2, so 20,000, we'd take valuable CPU time flipping the arrays into a temporary variable. So the developers of C++ decided we're just going to pass by reference. So you got to be careful and only change arrays when you know exactly what you're doing. But size is how many elements are currently in use. So let's say out of 10 I have a size of 6. So from 0 to 5 I have data. So I'm going to go from 0 to size is 6 to 5, and I'll print out student at the ith index. Here is the student. Here is the student's grade, grade sub I. Notice it's student sub I and grade sub I. They share the relationship. Now let's look at something a little more in depth. So all this routine does is get stats. We're going to return the max, min, and the average. Okay, so we're going to pass the grades array, because we don't care about the student names in this case, the current size of the grades array, how many elements there are, max, min, and average. Now what does this ampersand mean here? If you don't remember, that means it's passed by reference. That means when we change max, min, and average in this function, we are changing them in the caller also. When we have void and we're actually doing something, this is an action, we're getting stats, and we have no return type because we have a void, it's possibly a pass by reference. And these ampersands show us that. So when we're going to do this search, I'm going to set the max and the min to the first element. I'm going to set the sum of the total elements to 0. I'm going to go from 1 to less than the size. Now, there is a mistake here because we want this to be max of 0 and min is 0. We are setting the max and min to the first value. Now we want to go set sum to the array of 0 also, because we're going to sum all the grades. Now we want to start at 1 and go to the size or less than the size of the index, and if the current element is less than min, put that element in min. If the current element is greater than max, put that element in the max, increment our sum, and when we're finished, change our average. So basically, by the time we're done with this for loop, max and min will be set, and then we could calculate average on line 64. Notice that as soon as we finish this for loop, max and min are set, and they are set in the caller also. And as soon as we set average here, the caller variable that is passed is set. So let's look at main. Here is my students array. Okay, I have 10 rows from 0 to 9, and I'm going to fill it with home, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. This is the format for initializing a string array. Notice I only have 5 elements in the array. So I've got to set my array pointer to 5. I have to set my array pointer. I have to know where the next free element is. And then I have my parallel array. Again, it's 10 rows. I am just going to put in some data in here. So I'm going from 0 to the current size. or 1 less than the current size. So 0 to 5. And I'm just going to put some data in there, some numbers. Now, when you add another student, you have to put it in the next available cell. So the way this is written, current size is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. If we look at this array, we start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we executed these commands, we would overwrite Maggie's score. So you don't want to do a -1, you just want to say current size. And then you want to increment current size by 1 to point to the next free cell. Now I'm setting up to call getArrayStats. Remember, I'm passing these by reference. So I'm passing the scores array, the current size of that array. So right now it's 6, right? Because we had 5 plus this one is 6. And we're passing max, min, and average. These guys are passed by reference. Then I print the student scores. So we pass the student array, the scores array, and the current size. And we're going to finally print out the stats. Now here's an example of what happens when we go out of bounds again. So let's run this, or debug this, and we can see it in action. I'm going to set a breakpoint right at line 83. So we'll click run, and we can see current size is 5. I is undefined right now because I haven't initialized it yet. I would like to see my array, but I can't yet. I can't see my students array. So we will step. Remember, step is this one, step over. And then, actually, I could just continue. And now we are at the bottom of the code. So let's just make sure it worked. So student sub 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, Maggie, Peter. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 95. And the average score, the min score, 0, max is 95. Average is 32. Let's go a little slower here. I want to change this breakpoint. Let's set the breakpoint here, so our arrays are initialized. So we run. Now we're here. Here's my students array. You look at it. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 has data: Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, Maggie. Our current size is 5, which points to the next free location. I will step over. And our scores, here's the scores array. So right now I should have only 5 elements because I have not executed line 91 yet. So if I look at the scores, I only have 0 through 4, 5 values. These are uninitialized. See, they've got gobbledygook in them. So now when I step over, now I have the 95 in location 5, or index 5. Now we will set a breakpoint here. I will continue, and I'm just going to call this function called getArrayStats. One thing you can do is step into now. Step into will go into the function. Step over will just go to the next line. So if you want to debug a function, you could step into, or you can just set a breakpoint in the function. But I'm going to step into, and I'm going to go into getArrayStats. Now we can see what is our array. We can see our average is 0, our max is 0, our min is 100, and our size is 6. So I have 6 total elements. Now I'm going to set a breakpoint here and just continue. My sum is 195. My max is 95. My min is... Where is my min? I do not see my min here. That's a bummer. But my max is 95. Sum is 195. So when I step over, well, I can see min by just hovering over. When we step one more time, average will be set. We step again, we're going to go back to the caller. And we've got our array stats. So now max, let me step again, step over. Now max is 95, min should be 0, and average is what, 32. Now again we're calling print student scores. So if I step into, I'm passing the students and the grades. So all this function does is print out the data. So if we step again, step again. Now if we look at our data, we have student 0, Homer, grade 0. I'm just going to step out now. Let's say you're done. You just want to go back to the caller. I can step out and I should have my printout all done. So the final thing is just printing out the stats. So print out the stats. See, the stats are printed. And we're going to go out of bounds. Remember, we only go from 0 to 9. So I hit continue here. Oh, I get an exception, access violation, writing location. That's a fancy way of saying, hey, you've gone out of bounds. So this concludes the video on parallel arrays.